All right, Cindy, are we ready? Okay. Hey, Justine. Hello, good evening, all. Welcome to the Monday, May 19th City Council work session, calling the meeting to order, and welcome to all of our guests tonight. We start with roll, please.
Certainly, Mayor. Ms. Connolly?
Here.
Ms. Downs? Ms. Flynn?
Here.
Ms. Hiscott? Mr. Snyder?
Here.
Ms. Underhill?
Here.
Mayor Hardy?
Here.
Thank you, Mayor.
Ms. Downs and Vice Mayor Hiscott are en route, stuck in traffic. Alrighty, Wyatt, let's get started. We have a busy agenda, so we want to keep it tight.
So our first item on the agenda is the Affordable Living Policy Comp Plan Amendment, and Dana Jones is going to provide our staff report tonight. We are joined by members of our HSAC and our Housing Commission. Ms. Jones will make those introductions in just a moment, and I will note that Brendan Woodley is joining this meeting. It's his first meeting back with the City Council since the birth of his son, and so it's great to welcome Brendan to this meeting virtually. The request tonight is to get council feedback on this draft as a setup for an action by the City Council to formally refer this draft amendment to the Planning Commission at your regular meeting on June 16th. And so this is intended to be the final work session before that formal referral. And I'll turn it over to Ms. Jones for a briefing.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I got to apologize because I've given this presentation a couple of times, and some of you may have heard it before, so I'll try to be dynamic. And I just wanted to introduce, we have Jeff Pearson, who was co-chair of the Affordable Living Work Group, and then we have Brian Bowden, who's the chair of the Human Services Advisory Council. So we appreciate both of you guys being here. So we'll go ahead and get started with the presentation. So just when we get started, this is, as Wyatt said, the purpose is for you guys to refer this to the Planning Commission, and we have gotten some of their feedback. But every 5 years, we update the affordable living policy. And you can go to the next slide. Cindy? Oh, okay. Okay. So this update to the policy identifies key demographic and housing supply data and trends, and we reviewed a lot of backup data to put the plan together. And the whole purpose is to kind of address the challenges of unmet needs and give us an action plan to address that. And so it includes categories, goals, priorities, strategies to achieve, the action plan, and monitoring. And as part of the monitoring, we also have a housing dashboard that's going to be up as soon as the plan is adopted. Then we will put up our dashboard that will allow you to track in real time how we're doing with the things and the goals that we have. And so just before we get started on this, so everybody's on the same page, I just wanted to mention that affordable housing is housing that's affordable to everyone so that they don't spend more than 30% of their household income on housing. And that could be someone who's low income, that could be someone who's a homeowner who loses their job, which is happening a lot, has to pay a mortgage. They could be, not have affordable housing, so that could affect anyone. And this plan matters because we're talking about people who live and work in the city. And so just so you have an idea, when HUD talks about incomes, these are the incomes that we use for all of the programs that the city has. So low income is 30 to 50% of the area median income. The area median income is looking at all the income in Northern Virginia, DC, and Maryland, this whole metro area, and taking the median. We use that as a basis for all of our programs. So they look at a 4-person household, that's $154,700. So that's the income of a 4-person. They're saying that's the median income. And then everything's based off of that. So low income is 30 to 50% AMI, so that we're talking about a person at $46,000 to $77,000 of income. Moderate income is 51 to 80% of AMI. We're talking about 78,000 to 123,000. And then we have programs for workforce income, and that's 81,000 to 110%. And that's 124,000 to 185,000. So we have people in our programs that range from all these incomes, and our goal is to provide something for everyone, because all of those people, are still looking for affordable housing. You can go to the next slide. So the focus areas that we have in the plan are rental housing, home ownership, diversity of housing stock, preservation of affordable housing, unhoused and wraparound services, funding, and governance. And then just as background, we brought this to you once before, but it was just to do the initiating resolution. But since that time, the work group has met 8 times. They did a lot of work. Jeff was co-chair of that group. It was intense, really intense. It was a really diverse group. We had renters, homeowners, all different races. We had schools employees, business owners, developers, mortgage lenders, really great group of folks. Go to the next slide. So these are the changes since you guys saw the policy. It was in its early stages, and we have done a lot based on all the feedback that we've received from all the groups that we've gone to see. Some of those changes since our input that we got from you guys at the in December, are that we've revised the chapter structure. We've combined and modified goals. We've moved the strategies to go under each goal. We've added an action plan. So that's something that we got a lot of feedback on. So we added the action plan. And then the Housing Commission gave really good feedback, and we used the Housing Commission housing targets and made that part of the plan. That's now in the appendix. And they also did a lot of good analysis that informs the policy. So all of these things have been added over time, and we feel like it's really made for a really usable and readable document that's easy to understand. So you can go to the next page. The biggest thing that's happened is that the affordable living policy is now going to be part of the comp plan. We're really excited about that. Staff made that determination. Looking at you, Sally. And we feel like that's a really good thing. We've had this policy before, but it didn't really have a lot of teeth. And we feel like now that it's part of the comp plan, we're excited about that. The work group prioritized all the goals at their November 20th meeting, and so those are going to be indicated by a star as we go through this. So I'm going to go through it, but I just want you to see the changes that we've made and what's in here. So the first goal is rental housing. And just so you have a background, when we're talking about rental housing, when we're looking at rents in the city, a low-income rent for a four-person household is $1,354. A moderate rent is $1,895. Workforce rent is $2,707. That's all based on a four-person household. And so in the city, the first goal is to increase the percentage of affordable units in new development to a minimum of 12% up from the 2019 affordable living policy. And that one encouraged greater than 6%. Now, I will say this is a stretch goal. I mean, there's a lot of debate about it, and we understand that it may or may not happen, but we have a stretch goal. So in an ideal world, that would be what we'd have, or something close to that. Goal 2 would be increase the percentage of committed affordable units at or below 60% in the city from 3 to 6% of total housing stock by 2040. And we're talking about committed affordable. And then goal 3 is increase the percentage of deeply affordable 30 to 50% units to 25% of the total number of local affordable units in the city. And we want to align with the percentage of current and projected low-income residents in the city. And so I did a presentation to you all on the Affordable Housing Fund. So as you know, we're doing 99 new ADUs by the end of next year. We have 12 CCAUs, at our waiting list, 50% of that waiting list are folks that are 30 to 50% AMI, so those lower incomes. So that's a need, those lower incomes, that's a big part of our waiting list. And so market rate rent in the city has gone from $2,509 to $2,570 in 4 years. So we're trying to keep up with that. You can go to homeownership. So homeownership, our goal 4 is to increase the first-time ownership opportunities between 80 and 120% AMI. And those are people that can't really find housing in the city. Goal 5 is to incentivize development of affordable housing units and reduce barriers to entry for new home buyers. We're pretty excited about that goal. We've already made great strides with our affordable homeownership program. We hadn't had any new units, home ownership in the city since 2008. The last we had was the Spectrum. We had 8 units at the Spectrum. We got a grant from Amazon about 2 or 3 years ago. Since that time, we have 10 homes that people have purchased in the city, and our goal is to have 20 using that grant. And so we're pretty excited about that because the median home price in the city right now is $1.3 million. These folks are schools employees, city employees, and they definitely would not have had this opportunity without this program. You can go to the next slide. The next goal is preservation, and I'll mention this as a priority goal. We want to retain the affordability of existing committed affordable so that we don't have any loss due to expirations that are occurring. Committed affordable is units that have some type, like the Fields is committed because they use tax credits for that property. And the units that the city owns and operates, those would also be committed affordable because there's a covenant on the property. And then goal 7 is support aging in place rehabilitation. So as far as preservation, so the Fields has 96 units that we want to preserve those units. And then we used our Amazon grant to preserve the 10 units that we have over at the Reed Building, and those are teacher workforce units. So we were able to use funds from our grant to preserve those units, and we want to do more of that. For example, Pearson Square has 15 units that are expiring in 2027. So those are the type of things that we're thinking about when we talk about preservation. And our affordable housing fund is going to help us to do a lot of that, the changes that we've made. You can go to the next slide. Housing stock. Goal 8, which is a priority goal, is ensure adequate housing stock along the spectrum from single family to townhomes, duplexes, and multifamily. Goal 9 is to encourage larger household units, 2+ bedrooms, and multifamily properties. Goal 10 is promote policies and initiatives that increase housing stock diversity. And so the city is primarily made up of single-family and multifamily units, but we want to, like I said, encourage diversity of housing stock. We're excited about some of the things that have been happening as far as the accessible dwelling unit ordinance, the T-zone changes, and we feel like these diverse types will help with affordability in the long run. Go to the next slide. Then the next category is unhoused and wraparound services. Goal 11 is expand housing and service options for persons with incomes at 0 to 30% AMI and persons with disabilities. And then goal 12 is retain or expand unhoused services at the property yard. We know that's a long-term goal, and nothing's really going to happen with that for a while, but they just wanted to make sure that we know that that's a priority of theirs. Then we want to advocate for expansion of Medicaid options for housing services for Medicaid recipients, and improved understanding of housing along the spectrum. When I say that, I'm saying 0 means no income, up to 30%. We really need options such as single residence occupancy units where a person can rent a room, and that type of thing. The shelter, we have 12 beds currently. We want to keep those 12 beds and eventually expand on that if that is a need. We're only currently able to serve 10 males and 2 females in the city, and so we'd like to increase that. And we also have a group home in the city that serves 5 people that have intellectual disabilities. We have a community needs assessment that's going to determine, do we need more of that? What are the needs that we have with housing and unhoused? And then also, we have been dealing a lot with mental health and substance abuse. And so we want to take a look at those things. You go to the next slide. The next slide is funding. So goal 15 is secure a dedicated annual and index source of funding. 16, commit annual funding for at least 5 years. Goal 17, target annual amount of affordable housing funded by 2040 to 1,680,000. And so, as you know, this year we have a 6-year planning for the Affordable Housing Fund that runs concurrently with the CIP. And that was as a result of council adopting a new fiscal policies. So we're really excited about that because that's helping us to do some long-term planning for things that we see on the horizon. So we're excited about that. And I won't get into what those programs are because I already did that presentation for you all. But the main thing we're excited about is the preservation aspect and us being able to use those funds for preservation. You can go to governance. So governance is strengthen the existing policy structure by updating the statutory authority. This is like an eye test, sorry. Statutory legal authority. 19, and enhancing transparency and communication efforts, making sure that everybody gets heard. The people that use these programs are at the table making decisions about things that happen to them. We have been trying to do that with the 3 commissions in HHS. We have some users of programs on our commissions now, and we're really excited about that and want to see more of it throughout the city. Establish and maintain dialogue with city partners, including developers, local faith organizations. Actually, I see members of the Planning Commission here. They advised us to reach out to faith leaders and get feedback from them to see what their thoughts were about this. Some of them own land and that kind of thing. That was a great suggestion, and we plan to take it. And then we want to see more partnership between our commissions. Last week, we had a joint meeting with HSAC and the Housing Commission. We haven't really done that in the past. And so we want to start doing that more because they have a lot of concerns that overlap. Last week's meeting was all about homelessness. We had people from Fairfax, Arlington. We talked about the courts. We talked about services we received from Fairfax. It was great. And so we're talking about how we can work together. And then as far as governance, with ADUs, the Virginia State Code and specific ADU regulations, thanks to Cindy, we're looking to make some changes there. We're hoping to exempt the city from some of those regulations that will allow us to have greater flexibility with regards to ADU. So an ADU ordinance update is on the horizon next year. You can go to the next page. So this is the timeline for adoption for the next steps. So in the past 3 weeks, we had a community meeting. We went to the EDA and we went to the Planning Commission. So we're kind of taking this out on the road to get feedback from folks. And we have a track. You'll see that we have a chart that talks about all the comments that we have received. Many of those have already been incorporated into the document. Many we've responded to folks, like the community meeting. One of the biggest recommendations that they made is to include utilities when we calculate rent, so that it's an affordable rent and the utilities are already there. The way it works now, utilities are separate. Some localities do that, some localities don't. But that was a great, recommendation. And because of this meeting, which was all renters at the meeting, it was a really good recommendation, and we're going to take a look at that. And that's the kind of feedback that we've been getting from these meetings. And so basically, and then you can look at this. Take my glasses off. So where we are now is our council work session. We're going to refer back to the Planning Commission on June 9th, Planning Commission work session June 18th. We'll be back, Planning Commission will have a final recommendation and public hearing in July 16th. Then we'll be back to you guys, your final work session, August 4th, and then hopefully adoption August 11th. And then as soon as we're adopted, we're putting that dashboard up. So At this point, we'd just like to hear your comments and feedback, and like I said, I apologize to those of you that have heard this before. Letty, I'm looking at you, and Debbie, you're tired of hearing it. But I would love to hear your feedback, and you can either give that today, or if you'd like to send it to us. When I've made these presentations, sometimes people give them then, and sometimes people have a while to think about it and get back to us on it. If you have any thoughts on the process, any of those things, be welcome to hear that. And Brendan is here too if you'd like to ask any questions.
Great. Thank you, Dana. So this is my third time.
Sorry.
But it's really come a long way since I think we started with the initiating resolution last year. So thank you for the work on that. I'm actually going to open it up to our guests first for Brian and Jeff. Any comments from HSAC or the ALP work group before I ask council?
Hi, great to be here today. This is a document that has had a lot of input, and we've had, I've been living and breathing this document for a better part of a year now, and there has been, many voices have been here at the table talking about this issue. And I've done a good job in trying to listen to everyone and get all input to this document, right? And the process is not over yet, but it's a step in the right direction to solve the affordable housing crisis. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
And this is Brian. I just also want to recognize our Housing Commission colleagues who couldn't be here, and Hannah, Jordan, and Sarah Farrar, who co-chaired along with Jeff. So thank you to all those folks.
Great. Well, thank you for your work. Okay, council, do you have questions or feedback for Dana and the ALP team? Sorry, Laura, go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, Dana, I want to apologize. Ms. Hiscock and I were late this evening because we were at Meridian High School awarding some scholarships to graduating students. So it was for a good reason that we rolled in a few minutes late, but my apologies. I just wanted to, these are more sort of comments, a couple questions. I loved, some of the changes, updates, and of course I didn't see it at the initial version because I'm new on the council, but I loved the action plan, where we are, the gap analysis. I thought that was great. The one question, we were in talking about the expiring ones, like you brought up Pearson Square. How do those residents, do they find out, how far in advance do they find out if those, do they know that, I have another year or two here till I'm not going to be able to afford it any longer? Or do you know how that works?
Well, we haven't said anything to residents, and we'll probably, we want to come up with some type of solution.
Right.
We can't really do that right now, but we don't want to cause panic.
Right,
And
that's
this
right.
is a really good reason why when I talk about having people at the table who are affected, we've talked to some residents who are ADUs renters there, and they felt like it would be better to bring this up later on, after we have some type of plan or resolution in play. And they felt like it would cause panic, at this point, until we have something, some type of plan or something. So we haven't really reached out to them.
So again, just using Pearson Square as an example, so is that something that, and I'm sorry that I don't know, but could the city approach, or have we thought about approaching them and saying, could we extend these? I don't know who that question would go to.
It's been discussed. Yes.
Okay, great, okay. And I know that when I was running for office, I know the mayor told me that the bulk of the new ones don't expire, is that right? In the
Yes.
new development. So that's a hands off to, or a big round of applause for the council who made sure that happened. That's great. And I share your concern about the Fields as well. The Fields also is a home for a lot of our English language learning community in the school system. So I know everyone on council, and I know Ms. Flynn has brought this up particularly. We are also very aware and concerned of that situation. One question also about when, in terms of housing diversity, One of the things I thought was interesting was when I was on the campaign trail this fall, I met with a gentleman who, was retirement age, and he talked about the fact that he was renting a townhouse in Winter Hill, and he said he's just a single person. He doesn't need the size of a townhouse. He would love to stay in the city, but there are so few condominiums. And I thought that was an interesting, and I didn't notice on here when we're talking about diversity, see townhouses, duplexes, I don't know if we need to specifically put that in there. And I know that you see developments all over Northern Virginia, and they tend to be apartments. They don't tend to be condominiums. But I think that's something too that to keep in the back of our mind, that would be a nice option to have some more, I know there's some at the high school that I think are more on the higher end price-wise. But it'd be great if we could get more moderately priced condos coming online sometime.
In our affordable homeownership program, the majority of those are condos.
Oh,
When we're
great.
looking at affordable,
Right.
homeownership.
Yes, that's right.
So some of them are at, Brendan, I'm blanking out. Tell me the places where the condos are. But
Yeah,
we
I
have
think
some
some's
units
Broadway.
throughout the city.
Yeah.
Falls Chase.
Falls Plaza, comes to mind.
Park Towers, right.
Yeah,
right.
so it's,
Park Towers.
really
Yeah,
nice
yeah.
communities. People have been really willing to work there. They really show well. So
Right,
we
right.
have-
And I know the new townhouses that are coming on, I remember the mayor told me, I think it had been 20 years since, or maybe more, that townhouses or condos have been built in the city. So, it's good to see, and I'd love to see down the line more condos. And I also just wanted to thank you and acknowledge, when you talked about when the plan talked about encouraging larger household units. I just wanted to thank everyone for adding that line in there about, making sure that the impact on the school system's considered. So thank you very much for this report. It's great.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Who else? Mary Beth?
This is my first time seeing this, so thank you for that presentation. Yes. Ms. Lewis, you mentioned at the beginning, I'm really glad it's in the comprehensive plan.
Me too.
It really makes it easier to understand as opposed to a separate standalone document. So whoever's idea that was, kudos on that one. When we saw the first iteration of this, there were this many goals, and one of the questions we asked was, isn't that a lot of goals? So I also appreciate that you've prioritized goals and put them into different sections so that it seems as if they could be more attainable because they're parceled out in a different way. And I like the gap analysis as well. We're actually looking at what needs to be done.
Thank you.
So I really have no comments or suggestions. I think it's very good. Thanks.
Great. Aaron? Dave?
First of all, thanks for a lot of great work. I got my start here in the City of Falls Church after the referendum on off-track betting, which we killed, was the Falls Church Housing Corporation, where I had the opportunity with Carol DeLong to be the leader of that. So I have a long-term commitment to that, and I work with homeless people with my church in downtown Washington. I've got a long-term commitment. So my objective here is to make this as strong and effective and as widely supported as possible. So first of all, a process suggestion. I'm not sure how many people outside of the boards and commissions working on this really understand what we're doing here. So my request would be that we find ways, either through town halls or through more focus with all the city publications, to make sure that the entire community is very much aware of this and supportive of it. I think the more support, the broader support we get, the more effective we're going to be. And I suspect that despite your best efforts, there are a lot of people out there who have no idea that we're discussing this. So I would urge between now and any formal action that we look for more public discussion of this other than just the formal hearings and process. So that would be point number one. Point number two, with regard to priority 9, that was the one that I think Laura Downs mentioned, the impact on the school system. I totally support that. Strategy A, it talks about streamlining development requirements, including reducing parking, minimizing setbacks, and increasing density to promote city goals. My suggestion would be to add consistent with environmental and infrastructure considerations. because I think those are all issues which have been presented in these prior debates on those topics. Second sort of general point, the comparison to Alexander and Arlington, I think it tends to kind of downgrade the commitment that we've all made here and the progress that we've made so far. You have to understand that Arlington and Alexander have a much lower tax rate than we do, and they both have good reasons, because frankly, Arlington has Crystal City, which was just reinvigorated. Alexandria just got the freight yard basically given to them for increased development. So I'd like a little more kind of, when we do these comparisons, they're useful, but we need a more complete comparison. And I do think we've made serious efforts here, but obviously there's more that we can and should do. So that was the second major point. The third point about the funding, when I was going through the responses to comments, I think it was City Council question number 22, where you said you weren't going to, sorry, not you, where the commitment was made not to propose a monetary amount, and yet I look at the goal, and that's exactly what's proposed. So I would urge that we just take a look at that again to make sure that we're consistent with the way that we dealt with that comment in the comments template.
You're talking about goal 17?
Yeah, it's the 15 and 16 goals. I think those are the funding goals. And in our comments, I think we were trying to say that that we weren't going to make a firm monetary commitment, yet it appears that those goals do exactly that. So I think a little bit of wording maybe, or something else that suggests that these in particular are I think the word is stretch goals, because frankly, you never know. We may need to put all available funds into public safety, which benefits everybody, or all available funds into the schools. I'm nervous about creating a sense that this is going to happen regardless of the overall context in which we have to manage the budget in a given year. So just some language along that line. Again, I'm not suggesting total rewrite, but some language that takes into account that there may be circumstances where these goals are not reachable in a particular year, or something like that would be very useful, I think, to that goal. I think those were the major points that I wanted to make, and they were all for the intention of strengthening and extending and making as broad a support for this effort as we can possibly make it. I think a little bit of a statement, and I think this was also in the response to the comments, that, and I think this was Wyatt's comment actually, where he said that, and I want to go back to exactly what that was, but that was right around 22. And the point was made that these are goals, they are our best effort. And I'll try to get you that particular comment, but I think Wyatt expressed it well, and I don't see it perhaps more of an explanation about what this document is, what its strengths are, and what its use will be, et cetera, would be, I think, extremely helpful to the public. And that's the objective, to get as much buy-in as we possibly can, and as little surprise as we possibly can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Debbie?
Thanks. I didn't count how many times I read this or participated in meetings, but it was enough to see how much work has gone into this process, and how hard the staff's worked, and how hard our community volunteers have brought their expertise to the boards and commissions and brought in all of their experience. We're really fortunate to have the people we have had working on it, and both of your leadership, Brian and Jeff, as well as Dana and Brendan's. I have seen it come from a lot of information into a proposal, this presentation that's very well defined in each of the categories and assesses our goals. So thank you to each and every one of you for participating in this extensive process. And it's always good to have more people know about all the work that you've done and where it's come from. So the more buy-in from everybody, the better, to Mr. Snyder's point. I look forward to seeing the dashboard. I think that's something that will be really relatable for people. Like, what do you want to see if you're a community member who has, an hour to invest or read up on what's happening on housing in our community? Having a dashboard of here's what we have, here's what our goals are, here are the costs that we have to make some decisions on over time. I'd love to see that incorporated in the budget process so we can define, here's where we were investing, here are the changes that we've made, here's where we're currently investing, and what percent of our budget is that? How do we make decisions as a community on what we spend on infrastructure versus housing versus schools versus, how do we allocate all those pieces of the pie? And I think a dashboard is a really great way to have that data accessible and to make it, understandable to the community as a whole. So I look forward to seeing that progress as we move forward and even into this next year's budget cycle too. Thank you.
Thank you. And Brendan worked really hard on the dashboard in the whole project, so I think you'll be really happy with it.
Erin?
I'll just, like everyone else, extend my thanks for all the work that's gone into this. I mean, you look at all the meetings and all of those conversations that took place at the board and commission level. So again, just wanted to thank everyone for their participation and sort of digging into this project and its multiple iterations in order to try to make sure that what we're kind of getting here as we get to the end is what it is that we actually need and reflects sort of overall community values and a commitment to increasing affordable housing. I think I would echo some of Mr. Snyder's comments on just wanting to make sure that, in my mind, this document really sets forth affordability goals, but it's in the context of recognizing that we're a small jurisdiction, we're small geographically, we have high barriers to entry, and we're not going to saturate the market with housing to suddenly become affordable by itself. And so for me, this document is supposed to, or is hopefully reflecting the, statutory, regulatory tools that we have, the budget considerations that we need to make in order to kind of do government's part in ensuring that we are facilitating affordable housing opportunities because they're not going to happen by themselves in this market. And so when I look at that, I just want to make sure that, it's good to have active language. I support active language. But at the same time, since this is part of the comp plan, I, don't want us to get so far ahead of the community with things like, oh, well, we have a conversation about, or we have a page on missing middle in this affordability document. And for me, this isn't necessarily about a missing middle conversation. This is about how do we fund, committed affordable housing units? How do we extend units at Pearson Square? How do we have hard conversations about what it is that's going to happen with expiring units and whether we are fully committed to making sure that people who are in our community are able to stay in our community. And I think when you talked about sort of a stretch goal of new development at 12%, I would sort of say of the goals, I don't view that as the stretch goal. I view that as a non-negotiable going forward, that if you're coming in here and you're doing new development, you should be at 12%, because for me, that's the easier, more attainable goal, because we have full control as a council over, what we say we need in our development going forward. I think just in terms of more specific feedback, the document, in terms of the housing spectrum, talks about sort of accessory dwellings, maybe making sure to mention, the accessory dwellings, the cottage housing, a little bit more attention to the senior living opportunities that we are now, dedicated, senior housing that we have in the city. And then in the sort of references to tax abatement, in aging in place, I think it's important that we do have in there, tax relief, not in terms of just the formal tax relief programs, but a continuing effort to recognize and address the tax burden on residents generally. And that we also, in terms of, looking at statutory authority, also look at the tax code as a way in which, we can incentivize development, but also incentivize rehabilitation, including kind of preserving existing, older housing stock. And then just, I would find it helpful in some of the pages where we reference the percentages. I think it's important to have those goals of going from, for example, like the pages on 3% to 6%, or saying, we want by 40, to have 25% of the affordable units as in the 30 to 50% AMI range. But I do think it would be helpful to make that more concrete in terms of what that means. Because when I was doing some of the numbers, it's like maybe we're at 12, but that would mean we'd have to get to 45 in the next 15 years. And so what does it mean in terms of concrete investments? And then as, Mr. Snyder is saying, to have it reflected in terms of wow, that's a stretch goal. That's really, what we're trying to get at, recognizing the need. But I think some of the percentages downplay, right, the investment or what a stretch it is, given budget constraints, in terms of meeting some of these goals. So I think, again, just a little bit of context there is important. And I think overall, just, the view of this as a toolkit that we're committed to employing whenever we can, as best we can, is kind of my general take on it. And again, appreciate all the work that's gone into it. And then I will submit some minor things.
Okay.
I didn't understand. I'll just put the sorts of things I'm talking about. There was a reference to restrictive covenants and auditing land deeds for restrictive covenants that had a high sort of price tag on it. And it said to remove restrictive covenants, but some restrictive covenants, obviously not racially restrictive covenants that shouldn't exist and can't exist, but some restrictive covenants are good restrictive covenants in that they're actually the covenants that keep things affordable over time. So there were certain places where I wasn't quite sure where the, an affordability covenant would be a restrictive covenant that we would want to maintain and not remove. And so, those sorts of places I'll do kind of follow up on, kind of small things, but that do, go to the way that goals are reflected in the document.
Okay.
Thanks.
Justine. Thank you so much for putting this together and all the work that you have put into this over the past year. You mentioned that this now has teeth with it being in the comp plan. So could you talk a little bit about what exactly this document would require us to do? Is there anything that's binding, or what's the sort of weight for this being in the comp plan, or what teeth does this provide? And maybe that's for Sally too.
Yes, thank you.
A comp plan serves as a guideline for development when development is seeking zoning approval. And so it is a guideline, but it's not binding regulation.
So if there were some extenuating circumstance that does come up and we weren't able to meet these specific guidelines, there would not be any sort of punishment or, okay.
There's no consequence. I want to, kind of broadly speaking, there's no consequence. However, it is important for local governments to be consistent with their comp plan in their decision-making and in formulating their zoning ordinance, because the zoning ordinance is supposed to implement the comp plan. It's allowable to deviate from your comp plan. It happens often, but when you do so, the public justification, the public good, the rationale for why that's in the public interest should be stated.
Okay.
So that's the caveat.
Great, thank you. And just, I do appreciate the fact that there's a prioritization of goals, and these are goals goals should be something that we strive for, so it's not necessarily always something easy, but I do want to second the idea of, without knowing what our budgets are going to look like and some of these goals having a very high cost, yeah, I think I have a slight consternation, I worry looking at the dashboard, and it's certainly if we have a tough budget year, I don't want to see like fail across the board. And so I do want to make sure that that we are paying attention, that we are reaching for these, but that we're also aware of the broader circumstances. Just have a couple questions, comments. One is on page 16 of the document, under goal 7. It talks about strategy B, talks about a program to provide renovation assistance for seniors. Is that, would that be something, I guess we don't necessarily have the details. My suggestion for that, like we have in strategy A, for strategy B, should also be for low and moderate income households. Because, providing programs to provide renovation assistance for wealthy seniors would not necessarily be part of the same goal for this. And so I would just request a mention of low and moderate income there too. And then on page 39, so this is part of the appendix, I was just a little confused about the charts there. It was super helpful, but looking at this chart, it says 30 to 40% and then 50 to 60%. So we jump from, we're missing 40 to 50% in this chart, and 60 to 70% and 80 to 90%.
What page?
Page 39 in the appendix.
Okay.
And so I wasn't sure if, I had trouble reading the chart because I wasn't sure if we were missing certain percentages or we just don't have those percentages, or 40% meant to be inclusive of all 40, like from 40 to 49%.
And I will note that Mr. Woodley has his hand up.
Yeah, I was going to say, Brendan, do you want to take that one? Because I don't seem to have that.
I'm happy to jump in and say that those percentages that as you're seeing reflected are actually what we currently have in the city, which is why they're not like 30 to 50 and then 50 to like 70. It's basically what I believe we have 10 at 40%, 182 at 60%. 80 at 8 or 18 at 80%. Those are reflecting what we currently have. I agree that the kind of the span of numbers is a little bit confusing, but it's really just to reflect what we currently have and then what we need to do in order to get to meet the goals set by the Housing Commission.
And
Correct.
80% at 18% AMI. And so somebody making 70% AMI, what would they qualify for? The 60% units?
They would qualify for the 80. If they're making 70, they would qualify. It's that number and below. So if they're at 70, that would trigger to the 80%. But if they were below 60, then they would be able to qualify for the 60%.
Okay, so 60, if you're, just so that I'm clear, so if you're at 65% AMI, what would you qualify for?
80%.
80%, got it, okay. Great, okay, thank you for clearing that up. I had trouble reading the chart and I now understand it a lot better. And that is all of my comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, I think everyone's gone except me. So to wrap up, so overall, I have 2 comments, general comments, and then just one specific thing. So overall, I think in general, this has come a really long way, not necessarily just for the ALP itself, but in general, how we think about housing. So when I rewind kind of like 8 years ago, I think our overall goal was we need more affordable housing. And I think you probably have heard me talk about how we really need to measure what matters. And so the fact that we now have targets and more specific goals, and as well as a potential dashboard coming to hold us accountable, I think is just really important to kind of measure progress towards a specific number, because that can really drive priorities and strategies from our perspective and budgeting decisions. So thank you for getting us to that point. Second, I think the fact that it's very comprehensive. You've got 20 is a lot of goals, but I think the fact that it reflects both affordable, diverse, unhoused, deeply affordable, as well as governance and funding is really important, because clearly it's not just solving affordable. This is why, we focus on a spectrum of issues across housing, why we've done things like transition zones as well as accessory dwellings. So thank you for that. My specific comment actually had to do with, Dana, I think what you mentioned, I think what you've told us in the past is that majority of our wait list is actually below 60% AMI. And so that really should stick with us. We've had 700 plus households on the wait list right now. And I know that out of the 20 goals, the ALP group has prioritized 8 as kind of priority goals. I guess I would encourage us to think about prioritizing, I think it's goal number 3, the deeply affordable units, as one of the priority goals because of that wait list issue. Like, if we don't concentrate more on the 30 to 50% AMI targets, I think that wait list is only going to grow. So right now, we can't really move people off the wait list because we only produce units at 60% and then some at 80%, correct?
Other than the CCAUs.
The CCAUs, which I was going to get to next, the fact that we have 15 CCAUs that council is funding out of our operating budget is a big deal. 15 units in those deeply affordables is hard to do because the market doesn't want to naturally produce those.
Yes.
So I would encourage us to think about, if possible, either if we want to stick to only 8 priority goals, maybe we swap out another one, or maybe add a 9th priority goal. But I do think that thinking below 50% AMI is important to really serve the need of that population. So that was my main comment, but thank you for the work in getting us here, and again, the progress and getting us to more concrete targets that we can shoot for.
Thank you.
Okay? Sure.
One quick comment. Listening to the question and answer with the city attorney, it might be helpful to kind of add a paragraph as to what the comprehensive plan is and what it is not. I think that discussion was very, very helpful, and I think will clarify and will help, I think, smooth the way to getting this to final approval. And I don't think I said it enough. This is a really well-done document. The outline and the whole way it's laid out, and very, very well done. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Thank you for Brian and Jeff for joining us as well. We look forward to adopting this.
Yes, us too. It's been over a year.
Great. You ready to transition to topic 2?
We are.
Can I say one thing just before Jeff leaves? And that is, and this is related to our next topic, but I want to get to it before you go. We're going to be requested to refer the sidewalks and crosswalks to CACT, EDA, and Planning Commission.
The intent is to adopt it next week.
They're joining us tonight for that reason.
Okay, so is Jeff going to stay for that? Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So transitioning then to discussion of crosswalk and sidewalk design standards, we have our Head of Public Works, Amanda Stout-Bain, and our Deputy City Manager, and Andy Young, and our planner, Cameron Garys, joining us here at the table. And we also have boards and commissions. So we have CACT members here, we have Economic Development Authority members here, Planning Commission members here, and HSAC members here, represented by Mr. Persons once again. So the purpose of this discussion is to get council feedback on a revision to the adopted streetscape design standards. They apply to our commercial districts. And there are 2 recommendations. One, that we move away from the brick paver crosswalks in the commercial districts. And then 2, that we go to and go to a new standard that Ms. Stout-Bain will describe. And then with sidewalks, also go away from the all brick to a different decorative design. The purpose of both is to increase pedestrian safety, lower maintenance costs, while also upholding great aesthetics in our commercial districts. Ms. Stout-Bain?
Before we start with the staff report, given that we have quorum of the Planning Commission as well as CACT and EDA, do we want to invite maybe one rep from each board to join us at the table?
Yes, please come to the table if you can.
Thank you for making time to join us on a Monday night, on short notice at that.
And maybe one other point of context in terms of process. These design standards were developed over a really lengthy period of time with a task force. And so there's a lot of discussion that could be had. And so what we're proposing to council is to consider these changes and then have council take action on them next week, which sounds fast by Falls Church standards. If the council wants to take more time for it, we do think that these conversations can pretty rapidly expand, and so we ask council also just to be thoughtful about kind of where that would then fit on your work plan. So the goal is to.
That's a nice way of saying don't have scope creep.
That's right.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, sorry, Amanda.
Yeah, I think Cameron's actually gonna.
I got you. All right.
Excellent.
Well, that's a amazing summary, City Manager Shields. But as you said, this request to discuss updating the streetscape standards adopted in 2017 from its brick paver standard for crosswalks and sidewalks with an alternative standard. And we're looking for a short turnaround of adoption in the next week's meeting of May 27th. To give a brief background, the adopted standard is a guiding reference document for design of all new or reinvested streetscapes originating from new projects and developments in the city. These standards apply to areas designated as commercial grade streets, civic grade streets, and connecting streets. The deviation from the current brick paver standard for crosswalks and sidewalks originated from several observations. The first being that the brick design presents a safety hazard from an accessibility standpoint. Brick is also costlier to both install and maintain and will no longer be covered by federal grant funding. Staff proposes removing the standard for brick paver crosswalks and replacing it with continental high visibility crosswalks. This is a preferred standard from pedestrian safety point of view as is most visible to approaching cars. Another alternative is stamped asphalt crosswalks with high visibility markings. Staff recommends that the continental high visibility crosswalk design is used for higher volume crossings such as across Broad and Washington Street, while the stamped asphalt design could be an option for lower volume side streets within the commercial corridor. Regarding sidewalk design, staff recommends removing the requirement for brick paver sidewalks and replacing it with concrete sidewalk with brick banding throughout the area subject to design, streetscape standard design. Updates to the standards will impact current and future projects. Line 66, there's a list of current and future CIP projects and private developments which would be impacted by the proposed material change. With regards to fiscal impact, as I said earlier, the switch to the new proposed standard will result in overall lower install and maintenance cost. Additionally, more materials will be covered by federal funding in the future. In regard to timing, again, looking for a quick turnaround with adoption by City Council next week, May 27th.
Great. Thank you, Cameron. Debbie?
I think this conversation may feel like it's fast, but I know Mary Beth and I'm looking at catching your eye because we've been talking about it for many, many years and the challenges of maintaining, repairing, aesthetics of replacing, different aging of all the bricks. My question for you though is, we're really excited with the dual trails crossings to trial some of these types of materials out, and we haven't been super successful there. As you drive by, you see there's like red clay dust, it looks like. So while I'm all in favor of moving towards some of these things, we need to have some kind of service level agreement or find the right materials or the right combination before we continue to install things if they're going to have that kind of quality. So that's just my question / comment / request for us moving forward.
I had the same question. Mr. Shields, did we ever, I know when we brought this, I think Ms. Connolly brought it up a couple months ago. Did we ever find out, is it just the material, or was it that we did it wasn't put in the right way, or it was the material? I don't know if anyone.
So it is going to be remediated is the bottom line, and so there are message boards up for street closures on the 24th of this month where the contractor's going back to remediate it. There will be a different treatment there, I believe, and we can get council more information on that.
Okay.
Unless anybody is prepared to speak to it tonight.
My understanding that what's done on the WOD is different than the Oak and Broad pilot crosswalk. Those are different stamped materials. So even though it's flaking on the WOD, that hopefully the trial crosswalk across Oak, the top of Oak, is not. But someone from DPW should confirm.
So I don't know. So maybe by default I get to talk. So So I think it was, the material at the WNOD trail crossings is concrete, right? Which we're not repeating anywhere else kind of in the city. So the example up on the screen, as the mayor was referring to, is, oh, you even said it, is it Oak and Broad Street? Thank you. So that's a stamped asphalt, and the color's embedded in the asphalt that's used on the crosswalk. So that was put in as a pilot. I think it's held up really well. And we've seen examples of that material, that type of installation done in other localities, that it's held up well as well. I think from a staff perspective, we're trying to steer, I think, us more to the traditional continental striped crosswalks that are both easier to maintain and better visibility for pedestrians. So if you're waiting, I think, kind of where we're proposing, with these two elements, I think we're proposing to primarily within the city use what you see on the screen right here.
But you think, so just to get back to so you think it's because the stamped asphalt will hold up better than what's at the trail, the stamped concrete?
Completely
That's the issue.
different set of materials.
Okay,
yes.
so we'll take, okay, that's great. Thank you.
I was not, from the staff report, I wasn't quite able to follow the discussion on the sidewalk standard. So it was talking about Yankee Hill versus standard detail, and then there's some pictures in some of the other documents. Could you talk a little bit more about exactly what Yankee Hill is and what the changes that you're proposing for the sidewalk design standard?
Do you want to start?
Okay, well, I'll start off and you can fill in the gaps. I guess the Yankee Hill standard is what you may see along West Broad Street, where it is a pattern of only brick pavers from curb to curb. And the new proposed standard is what you would see here, which is it's concrete, but you have brick banding on the outside. It does not cross over, as you may see on some parts of Broad Street, across the panels of concrete. So it just is primarily a border around the edges and also the planter beds, and the rest is concrete.
And so this is not changing any of the planter bed details that had been previously adopted? Because I guess there's a whole thing with raised versus level planter beds. This is not changing any of that?
No.
Okay. And then was there a reason not to go with stamped, I guess, stamped concrete or stamped asphalt for the sidewalks?
I think this was just.
Cameron, can you bring the microphone over?
Oh, sorry. I believe that this is the standard that DPW wanted to go with. Is for, I think part of it is repeatability of the pattern, which is sometimes difficult to recreate. And also, I believe there was something about that technically to actually use the stamps, that you had to have a qualification or certification that people at DPW in the city would have to apply for to use. I don't know if you know about that. But.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that piece, but I guess, yes, what's being proposed here, right, for the sidewalks would be the concrete with the brick banding, which seems to both allow for some of the historic character and maintain some of that brick, but with significantly less tripping hazards and maintenance issues.
I would be interested, I mean, I don't know if there's an example, like, is there any place that's doing this where I could see a picture of that? Because part of me just wonders, like, if it just goes to all concrete rather than, like, I don't know if that brick on the edge would look
The front of
questionable.
Broaddale is that currently.
What?
The front of Broaddale. is that.
Broaddale? Okay, so I can go visit that.
They have a double brick course in between squares, and this would be a single
Single line, okay.
course.
I will also note on the Broaddale version with that horizontal cross piece, that's an ADA visibility issue, and so you don't have that proposed here, just the parallel. Because
Yeah,
when you
that's the
cross,
other
when you cross the sidewalk and you're visually impaired, all of a sudden you get a different texture and color. You think you're coming on a ramp in an intersection. So DPW looked at this very closely, and that's why you see the parallel lines, and you don't see the brick crossing anywhere near ramp intersection for ADA compliance. And if I could just highlight one point Cameron said, because it was a good, robust discussion on exactly your questions. If this was all stamped, let's say the asphalt, then when you went back to patch it, it's very hard to match the colors and get that pattern back in. And so this is also easier to maintain the look, feel, and the accessibility.
Gotcha, okay.
Sure. I just want to ask one question on this one. Can you scroll up to the top of that picture? Is that something we'll also have? Will that be the existing more brick?
I think this was trying to show.
And microphone.
This was to show the connection to pieces of, let's say, Broad Street that may have the paver currently, and how that transition would look between what there is currently and what is proposed.
So just my final thoughts on this. I am somewhat partial to the stamp brick crosswalks. And so even for the higher volume areas, and I'm specifically leaning towards those more just because they're more distinctive and it better declares the space that's part of the pedestrian realm. When you have something that, like the continental stripes, it seems more like a continuation of car first space. And so I do like that clear color distinction of the red and texture distinction of the stamped asphalt crosswalks. Just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question on the sidewalks? So where a follow-up question on the sidewalks. Where the sidewalk standards, like a lot of these sidewalks are really much deeper, right, than what's reflected maybe on this drawing. So if we're talking about, Broad Street or North Washington or South Washington, you conceivably have like a 20-foot setback. And so is there a way to incorporate, if we're moving to, just concrete with brick ribbon, that where you have deeper setbacks, that you would have wider ribbon of brick so that you don't lose the visual of the brick ribbon and it just doesn't become like a piece of thread, relative to the proportion of the setback? Because my concern would be then you do lose the aesthetic of we're trying to keep the brick and the historic sort of charm and the, cohesiveness to, other areas of the city in the actual sidewalk standard. And so I guess I that's my plug. Actually make it more proportional and increase the ribbon if you can. And I think for even where the flush planters are, you might want for some sort of demarcation to have a brick ribbon, even where you have a flush planter.
My related point was how this interacts with when you have an amenity zone and then the outdoor dining area, because otherwise the ribbon might run through it. And so just show kind of what a 14-foot wide sidewalk looks like in the 20-foot, setback areas, as Aaron said. That was one of my comments, so I thought I would just tag on to that.
Yeah, I'll say those are helpful comments. And I think one thing we're trying to do is by including all of these standard details rather than just kind of more generic text, is to provide, these are things that contractors and engineers are able to then incorporate when they're actually doing the design. The road is not actual, this is generic, it's not actually going to look like this. But then a contractor can take this spec, this detail, and incorporate it into the design. But yes, understand what you're saying about making sure that it, in reality, reflects dining areas and widths and things like that. There's no actual dimensions on some of these. Some of them have dimensions, but the engineers take it and apply it.
Okay. I think Debbie had a follow-up thought to her first question.
Yeah, we've gotten through several of them, but I just had a comment from our ESC meeting last Thursday when we were talking about sidewalks, and they're certainly in favor of doing everything that makes, walkability, bikeability better for the community. But they had a question about concrete sourcing, and because there are lower emission concretes, and how that might tie into our government energy action plan. I don't know the expense difference. I don't know what provisions we have right now in terms of procurement and how we do all that. I know those are things to think about, but I thought it was a great suggestion to see where and when we could use lower emission concrete sourcing. That's it.
Mary Beth?
Thank you for this report. It's great to see this and that we're moving forward here. A couple questions with the striped crossing. One of the things that happens in Falls Church is that we put in that thermoplastic and then it fades and then it doesn't get redone. Is there a schedule that it would be redone so that because those are on our busiest streets, we would have regularly updated fresh crossings?
I'll say that these thermoplastic crosswalks are designed to, they require a lot less maintenance than just paint, right? Than just like putting paint down. These are much more durable and more visible from a Vision Zero, pedestrian safety standpoint. And actually, both the Continental one and then the picture of the other, the stamped asphalt one, has thermoplastic on the side. So the schedule of refreshing is something that the DPW can certainly look at, but I will say these are designed to be more durable overall.
Okay. I just think of like the ones by Oak Street Elementary, I think those are thermoplastic. They're really faded and need to be redone. Some of them have been patched over and not redone. That's totally not related to this conversation. I really was concerned about just how often that thermoplastic gets updated. I hear Ms. Underhill on that the stamped asphalt looks really cool. I wonder if it might be better not to have it at all. Just have it all be thermoplastic. Why would we make this one less safe, even if it looks cooler? And could we put thermoplastic stripes on the stamped asphalt? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's something we've thought about. I do believe, and if anyone else remembers this, that the kind of baked into the stamped asphalt is it is a bit more reflective than all of these are going to be more visible than the brick that we currently have.
Right.
But the Continental style is probably the most visible.
But could we put stripes on that or not? Continental stripes on the stamped asphalt?
I'm not sure. Go ahead.
I don't know if you could, but I'm not sure.
What the point is? Okay.
It starts to get a little,
Okay.
instead of
I'm
messy.
just asking. Okay. The Yankee Hill, so that would only be used on the sidewalks now as the ribbon, right?
Correct.
The red brick,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Is there a color that goes with that? Because it seems like there's all different colored sidewalks we've ended up with. Is there a specific Yankee Hill color, or is that the color?
Pantone for bricks.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a natural product, and so I think it does depend kind of on where the clays are coming from and that type of thing. But that standard is what is provided to all of our contractors and to developers when they're putting in the brick.
Okay. And what about the maintenance on these existing sidewalks that are starting to be in bad shape? Like as I drive out of the parking garage at Harris Teeter, all those Yankee Hill pavers are really uneven and not in great shape. So when that maintenance happens, will the standard require them to switch to something else? How does that work?
I think as we've talked through that, it's situationally dependent. Because it kind of depends, right? Like what condition that specific location is in, how big it is, and what it touches. And so I think we would opportunistically look to change over, but that might not be the most economically feasible decision for the city to make in a particular situation. So it would be dependent on the specifics of what needed repaired.
Is that on us, or is that on the owner of the property?
I think it depends.
That is also specific.
Yeah, the more recent projects, we have maintenance agreements with the property owners, the developers. The older projects, it's the city's responsibility.
Okay. So have we contemplated taking an inventory of how the existing brick sidewalks are and connecting with those property owners to say, when the time comes and you're going to redo this, we'd like you to do this? We'd like you to, at the Harris Teeter garage, for example, when you redo this, because they may, if they're in charge of it, they may redo it and put in those, Yankee Hill pavers again that aren't quite as effective.
So I don't have an exact answer on
I
that.
think it's something we can look into. I think
We're gonna-
what you articulated is probably a pretty big effort. So, to
Right.
map out all of that for
Yeah,
the
yeah.
whole city. But it's something we can take back.
Yeah, I just think going forward, because now we have all these brick pavers, and as they age, they are in different conditions. And, the ones outside of CVS are, you trip over them because they're all uneven, and those repairs need to be made. So how does this new standard fit into that? I think that's a question worth considering over the whole city. And then my last request, and this is not actually related to the pavers at all, but in the staff reports, and I've asked this one before, could we not say Founders Row 1 and Founders Row 2 and West End, but call them by their real names? It's one of those things that I think as a city, we need people to say Madera Founders Row, Madera Falls Church, West Falls Station, but we keep on going back to what we all know as we refer to it as a development, but I think we need to actually use the right nomenclature on things. Thank you.
Dave, do you have comments?
Sure. Thanks a lot. First of all, I very much support the movement that is being discussed here toward, particularly for the crosswalks and anywhere there's safety involved, safety's got to be number one. On the other hand, I think the brick, or the appearance of brick, links us together with the past, and so I think it's useful where we can do that. We should continue to have what can most easily be maintained, which is, and I'll leave it to the experts as to how to best create the appearance of brick, where safety is perhaps less important and appearance is more important. I did attend a session where there was an interesting discussion as to whether concrete paving was better than asphalt for roadways, and I think that's something we ought to think about over the longer term. I note that there was a discussion in the document about de-icing materials, and I noticed this winter in particular that some of the applications seem to really chew up sidewalks and driveways, and I'm wondering if we could take a look at what chemicals we're using. It was really remarkable, the amount of pitting that I saw as a result of this winter. So I wonder if you could take a look at that as well, since that's in the overall document that we're reviewing. Finally, and it would certainly be subject to cost ramifications, but I love the discussion about the manhole covers being public art or simply blending in. And I think anyone who's been to New Orleans is impressed with their manhole covers as public art. And more closely here in DC, if you really look at some of the manhole covers are actually dated. So some date back to the 1880s. So anyway, I guess if you're in local government, you look at manhole covers, right? That's what you do. But I thought that was a little bit of an interesting discussion, and there may be some opportunity in the future. I mean, clearly I'd be concerned with anything that raises costs, but I think that was a little bit of an interesting discussion in the document, and I wanted to let you know that I saw it. And it does raise some interesting potential prospects in the future, again, subject to any cost or ramifications. But overall, I think we're moving in the right direction. And as I said, for crosswalks, safety is number one. And for sidewalks, clearly it's important too, but I'm assuming we're going to be more level there, hopefully not dealing with cars on the sidewalk, at least as a general matter. And there you might consider just making sure that we're maintaining this link to the past, which I think is something that I think helps unite our community and collect us together. We move to the future even as we give some nod to the past in terms of the sort of the visual elements. Those would be my comments, but I really appreciate this, and I want to compliment Mary Beth Conley, who I think was the first one who raised the brick sidewalk issue, and well done. I really like where we're moving. Thanks.
Laura, do you have any comments? Aaron?
I just had a few additional ones. So my main concern is that, so for crosswalks, I think I'm in favor of the continental high visibility, just like make sure that it's visible. Sometimes, I love having the brick everywhere. And used to, in DC, like going across like the broad brick and paver sidewalks. But I think, just when we hear traffic concerns, and, even being a pedestrian in the city, when you're walking across crosswalks sometimes, I'm like, in the evening, you're like, wow, I wish I was in a better high visibility crosswalk right now. And so I support that, and also I'm a little concerned, like, that we're just gonna have lots of different types of treatment between the concrete and the ribbon, and then the, stamped asphalt, and then whatever is pre-existing, and that it might just be better to move to like crosswalks that look like crosswalks throughout the city, regardless of whether you're in like the downtown core or in any of the side streets. And then for the brick sidewalks, I guess my concern is just like whether this becomes very haphazard over time. And so I support moving to the concrete and the ribbon, but for pre-existing brick, like if we have a concentration, right? Like we talk sometimes about like main streets, right? Like the Main Streets program, and should we really have sort of a focal point that's brick sidewalks, or where we have our official design district, or, City Hall and the community center, like should those be brick sidewalks, and we have a commitment to maintaining them, as opposed to, what gets replaced when, and then in the place that we're trying to make, a special place and doing great streets and whatever else, like it ends up being really disjointed because of the trajectory of just like when things fall apart and need to be replaced. And so I would actually support like looking at the city like map and saying like in this concentrated area, we're going to remain committed to actually doing brick sidewalks and, maintaining them and updating them and ensuring that they're safe, and going to property owners and making sure that they're maintaining their properties in a safe way. And then for everything that we are building out from X point, then like these are the standards that are adopted along with just continental, highway, whatever it's called, for the crosswalks. And so I would actually like, like a highlighted map of maintaining brick somewhere and then letting everything else move to a different standard.
So that would be kind of creating a new geographical area where there'd be a brick sidewalk standard. Is there support for the council with that approach, I guess is.
So I think Cindy's going to pull up, go ahead, Amanda.
Yeah, so this is the area that the streetscape standards apply to today. And so it is it's a lengthy area.
Yeah, and I guess I'm thinking like much more in the, yeah, like.
So the 100 through 400 blocks of Broad Street?
Yeah, basically.
And then
Maybe the legs
similar
going
for
up.
Washington Street?
One thing that occurred to me, we GovOps met a couple days ago on that. I think it was the Tuesday where it rained all day, and I parked on Park, and walked up to the community center, and that's the brick sidewalk there. And I actually slipped, and I was actually thinking of you, Jeff. I was like, this would be treacherous for Jeff, and so I think that's part of it too. Is these brick sidewalks that are on a hill, I think. We should really think about pulling those out maybe, because that, so then I walked onto the asphalt. But, I'm not a senior citizen. I'm not someone who has a physical disability. So, and I slipped on that. So I just, and it is sort of a little incline there. So I'm wondering if, when time and budget allows, that we focus on brick sidewalks that are on a hill, that are not flat.
I guess one quick thought in reaction to Aaron's idea about, do we want to identify like a civic core where there would be brick sidewalks? I guess my concern is those are also our highest pedestrian areas. And so Laura's example where, we might actually have the most traffic there. And if we maintained brick, we wouldn't really be solving the accessibility issue. I certainly don't think staff would be prepared to come back on Monday with a plan for that if we really wanted to adopt something quickly and be able to move on it too. But I'll look to staff for.
Right, and I guess, I'm sorry, and you finished, that is my point, is that this is the community, the city hall, and of all the places that we would want it to be safe, it'd be there, so.
Okay, I think all of council has gone. Oh, Justine?
I just had a quick question, following up on the safety discussion and the crosswalks. Is it simply a guideline to use continental striped crosswalks? Or is there actually a study that shows that continental striped crosswalks versus brick paved crosswalks are substantially, have lower incident rates than stamped concrete? I guess when we're saying it's safer, is that like a claim or just a guideline?
In our staff discussion, we were debating these two things, and I kind of stopped the group and I said, okay, hold on. Like if we want to use pedestrian safety as our North Star for making our decisions, what would our standard be? And I had universal agreement that that would be the answer.
Okay, so it wasn't, but I guess, so it wasn't based on studies, it was more so based on.
I think it was, the collective
Based on
groups,
group feel.
technical experience.
Okay, that's fine.
Kind of in the field is the way I would kind of characterize it.
Got it, okay. I guess I'm still strongly in favor of a differentiation in terms of color, especially at some of our most used intersections, like Broad and Washington. And so if we do end up going with that striped continental, I would be strongly in favor. I know Alexandria has done this in some places where they're actually able to put colors in between the crossings, just something to make it differentiate this as a different space when you're entering into Falls Church at some of these key intersections. So if we do go with this, I would like to see some other color or something in there.
I'll say that I like that idea. If it was green under there, I don't know. But something that does make it clear that it's a pedestrian area. But, say again? The bike lanes are green in DC.
Amanda?
Yeah, I was gonna say some of that from a kind of traffic safety, the MUTCD, manual traffic control, requires certain things. I mean, this is what so from a kind of Vision Zero safe streets standpoint, this type of high visibility crosswalk is one of the preferred things. And there have been, occasionally we do artistic ones. There's some rainbow crosswalks, and I know there's another one being planned, particularly driveways in certain areas, but I don't think we can wholesale make these green or a different color. Again, with the overall goal being the visibility of the pedestrians and making it read both to the motorist and the pedestrian as a crosswalk was the most important aspect.
Okay, I do want to open up to our boards. We'll start with CACT and then move to the right.
Thank you for allowing us to join us. I'm Arthur Agan, the chair of the CACT. We're joined here today by Jessica Helbert and Stuart Whitaker, who are members of our board. Stuart's the vice chair, and I want to ask Jessica, do you have any comments? I've got a nice little list here.
Come up to the mic, though.
So I do, thank you. So safety is, I'm pretty sure for all of us on the CACT and all of us in here, safety is the most important thing. So barring that, I don't care necessarily what they look like. I just want to make sure that we're doing the safest thing we can. I don't know what the current crosswalks are at West and Broad and then at Cherry and Broad, but I know two people, Haven Bari, a ninth grader, a good friend of my son's, got hit on his e-bike in the crosswalk at West and Broad. And then Allison York, a mother of my seventh grader's friend, was hit at Cherry and Broad in the crosswalk, broad daylight. So that to say, whatever it is out there, I think I just asked that we are always going for the the safest that we can. And unfortunately, things are happening, so let's just keep that in mind until, hopefully nothing worse than just getting hit happens. So, thanks.
Okay, so you want me to
Stuart?
go next?
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
First of all, I appreciate the opportunity that CACT was brought in here. I am a frequent bus rider. In fact, I was on the bus at 4 o'clock today, and I'd like to speak to the impact of the street design and the planters on using the buses. A couple specific examples. If you take the 28A, which runs west into Tyson's, and you stop at Lee, and you get off in the back of the bus, you step right into the middle of a planter. This is a problem. It shouldn't be that way. I don't think that, you need to plan where these bus stops are and where these planters are. So that's sort of a general principle. In addition to that, I find that the raised planters are very, very problematic. I was on a bus a year or so ago, again, heading west at Haycock and Broad, and there was a woman. It's probably my age. I am a senior, but I'm relatively mobile. But she was not able to navigate to get over the raised planter in order to get on the bus, right? And so the bus driver is in traffic, it's congested, blah, blah, blah. The bus driver did not wait for her to be able to get on the bus, so she missed the bus. It's a real problem that I'd like to see addressed. Thank you.
So I have a whole bunch of comments, one of which was about to make sure that the raised planters was raised. Sorry about the pun. I think they're actually getting used a little too much within the city, within constrained areas. The current streetscape standards say that the preferred planter solution is the level one, and that the raised should only be used where there's completely adequate walking space, and I think that space is an issue. I think they've been used a little too much where they shouldn't be. But as far as what was presented here, one thing that came out to me is I was confused when looking at the high visibility versus the stamped asphalt. And what I've heard tonight has been, could be use stamped asphalt, which implies it's very vague and probably, and I've also heard it sounds like doesn't really want to be used. So I'm kind of like, if we're going to use it, let's say where we're going to use what, and be very clear about that. Right now, I'm confused on what's going to be used. And if you don't want to use the stamped asphalt, I'd say come out and say it. The stamped asphalt, in my opinion, is a really good solution. The product on Oak and Broad, I think, has held up extremely well. I really like it. The only thing I don't like about it is that the stamping pattern is kind of bigger than a normal brick. So it's fine though, not a big deal. Although I do have a question. I know that there's other stamp patterns, and if you had examined the other stamping patterns. Some of the ideas I've heard, I think, are really good. I think the suggestion about mixing up the continental stripes, the implication was in between the stripes. So we'd still have the high visibility of the white, but in between you could have it could be brick colored in between the stripes, I think was kind of a suggestion that was coming out, just to differentiate. I do think we need to differentiate the city streetscapes and everything so that when you're in Falls Church City, you know you're in Falls Church City. The stripe does not say that. It says you're everywhere else. One other comment on color. The sidewalks, I'm wondering whether the concrete in the middle can actually be colored. So you've got a brick edging surrounding a brick colored concrete. Same pattern, same solution, just adding a little coloring to it so that it looks all brick colored and you've got that consistent look. Shouldn't change the maintenance on it, I don't believe, and should be a good solution. The other thing I wanted to, I'm jumping around a little bit, I know. But on the sidewalks, the diagram that's on the monitor is obviously narrow. I understand that. I look in the streetscapes and there's a typical 16-foot cross-section that divides it into the building zone, the pedestrian zone, and the amenity zone. One of the things I think we struggle with is once sidewalks are built, the building zone tends to creep out, the amenity zone tends to creep in, and the walking zone, the pedestrian zone, tends to shrink, which is not beneficial to anybody. Could we differentiate those three zones? Maybe it's that brick stripe, so you don't have this giant wide with a little bit of brick. Can the brick borders go along those zones so that the brick borders define the zones? So everybody knows where the pedestrians are supposed to be walking, and the businesses knows where they can put their tables. Right now, there's really nothing that shows anybody all of that. And I think that would also help with the concern about it being, well, you got a wide sidewalk, where do you have the look? As far as areas for the sidewalks, one suggestion I would make that might accelerate things, we have the small area plans. I would just grab areas out of the small area plans. So for instance, the downtown small area plan has a central entertainment zone. That could be a zone that we just say for streetscape standards, the central entertainment zone will have the streetscape standards. I think very easy, very quick, very consistent. Maintenance costs, colors of concrete. The last thing I will say about the stamped asphalt clearly does not work, is you do get a physical feedback when you're driving over a grooved surface, even if it's for a short period of time. The stamped asphalt gives you that, the Continental stripes do not. When the crossings went in initially, before any stop signs had been installed, cars were stopping, cars were slowing down. The difference in color alone slows people down. I think the visibility may be there, but I would like to see data that says that the Continentals are safer. I think there's a couple of other little pieces to the stamped asphalt that helps them. The fact that there is high visibility lines along each side, I think helps clearly set that as a crosswalk. I think I'm personally in high favor of the stamped asphalt. I think that covers pretty much all my nice long list.
Great, thank you. Before we move on, so I did want to make sure that the comments about the raised planters were captured. So while it's not really in scope for what we want to tackle for right now, I do want to make sure that Public Works is aware of those and something that we can follow up on, because I hear your concern about buses. Okay, HSAC?
Hi, I want to just comment on two comments that have just been previously made. Stuart talked about the bus stop that is in question. I don't even try to wait for a bus there at all. I mean, I just wheel my scooter to the next possible bus station down the way, because I just I don't want to wait for. I mean, I'm afraid that buses are just going to wheel right past me, and that's it defeats the whole purpose of I think having that planter should be removed for sure. I also just want to quickly say that what Laura said about the sidewalk. I don't even go down that street at all, because I'm afraid I'm going to fall out of my scooter. So it's not safe at all. But I am a frequent connoisseur of sidewalks. Walkability very much for me is wheelability, right? I appreciate a lot of the sentiment made around brick sidewalks. But for me, it vibrates, and when I'm going over them, and it causes me to have to stop and rearrange myself, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of it. So I would strongly urge, these standards to be updated for sure. And I mean, I go down the public sidewalks every single day. Like I mentioned, wheelability is my way of getting around town. So I think that this is a good proposal, but I really want to see, as much disability, not only meeting the ADA standards, but making sure that everyone of all abilities can get around and be able to fully be being able to get around without any problems. So, thanks.
Jeff, may I ask if you had an opportunity to try the stamped asphalt pilot? Like, how does that react the same way brick does? I don't really know.
On which intersection? Sorry.
That's the Oaken.
Across from the post office.
Yeah.
Does it have the same? Does it have a better? Is it more like concrete for you than it is like brick as a
I
stamped
actually
asphalt?
haven't been on that one recently, so I could try it out. So.
I mean, that would be good feedback to know
Yeah, for
how,
sure.
it seems like it would be better, but until we know it is, we don't.
Does the angle of the lines make a difference?
No. Not personally in my instance, no.
Okay. Planning Commission?
Hi, Andrea Comont, Chair of the Planning Commission. We have a bunch of commissioners here, so I want to give everybody an opportunity to weigh in if they have comments.
You have quorum.
Yeah. Bob? No? Phil? Okay, well, I don't know that my opinions are gonna, I'm sharing my own personal opinions and not those of the Planning Commission in that case. I mean, I'm a fan of the Continental Crosswalk for safety and visibility reasons. It's also simpler. I think anywhere cars are driving, we've had a lot of really bad luck with other kinds of materials. So including, like as was referenced earlier at the Harris Teeter, where the driveway is brick and is really having a lot of trouble. So I think anywhere we expect cars to be, I think there should not be brick or other materials. That said, I think we haven't had a lot of luck with concrete vendors. It's not just, those crossings that are sort of pitted and damaged, or whatever the term is for when it just looks like it's sort of like bubbling and sheathing off of it. I mean, that's happening in other areas around town. When I walk anywhere that there has been new concrete poured, it doesn't look good. And so we need to fix that, I think, if we're going to be putting a lot more concrete around town. And I would say, like, concrete slabs, they create tripping hazards too. I mean, I trip more often on concrete walking around. Maybe that's just because I'm walking on concrete more often than brick. But I trip all the time on concrete because the slabs go like this, and city comes out and shaves them down to even it out, which helps. So there are ways that we can maintain these things. I just wouldn't want people to think that concrete is, does not have these kinds of tripping hazards, because it does. And then I think I aligned myself with Ms. Flynn's comments on brick being important to the city's visual identity and character. Personally, I'm a fan of brick. So if we could figure out a way to maintain it and keep it where we currently have it in the streetscapes, that would be my own personal preference. I don't think that's probably an outlier, maybe even for the commission on that. I also think we've, I guess I would also say, like, imagining concrete slabs in front of, like, the Cherry Hole farmhouse makes me really sad. I grew up here. I'm just used to seeing that. That's the part of the character of the city. So I think this is a big change. And I also wonder about the timing. This is the first time hearing about it tonight. To introduce it tonight and then vote on it in a week when there seems to be a lot of outstanding questions seems pretty quick. And I am also concerned, like Ms. Flynn, about the sort of mismatch. I think we're going to have a real hodgepodge of brick and we have that today in areas of the city, but we've installed a lot of brick just in the last 5 years with all the new development that's come in. And so now we're going to kind of do a 180 and do a totally different thing. I did have a question about the reference to Founders Road 2 being impacted by this decision. Is that the corner that is currently being redone? because it was laid at the wrong angle? Or I'm curious about why the rush, really? Is it because of this Founder's Row 2 project?
No, it's Founder's Row 2 is going to have the brick treatment. That's in its approved site plan.
The staff report currently says Madera Falls Church
Yeah.
is
I'm
going to
sorry.
be impacted.
Madera Falls Church, thank you.
Well, I don't know what that is. Is that Founder's Row 2? Okay, thank you. I should know what that is. I can't keep them straight.
So the issue is we are letting contracts right now, on a weekly basis for additional projects. And so not having a standard is quite awkward for the city. So we made kind of an ad hoc decision on the Maple Avenue one at council direction to go to a different standard there. We're working with the Quinn project on a different standard, and so we would like to regularize it.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, those are my opinions. I don't know if any of my planning commissioners want to speak now that I've spoken. Okay.
Okay, we also have EDA.
Thank you.
Welcome, Jim.
First of all, great comments, and I kind of agree with most of what's said tonight. It's fair to say the EDA is in favor of what's being proposed. I do have a comment about the standard, and that concern is, I think, more importantly for the business community is that we have consistency. And with the discussion about Harris Teeter, for example, I would think we'd want something in the standard that if the city determines that the deterioration is at a certain level, that we would encourage, or I don't know if we can mandate, but we would encourage that we go to the new standard, because over time, that's going to save them money, rather than continually repairing the brick, because that is a bad situation there. And we'll have others like that over time. So I think as best we can to require that the new standard go in when the conditions literally warrant that as a cost benefit. Thank you.
Did I get all of our boards? Okay, thank you all for joining us. So my kind of wrap-up comments, this is why I look back at the 2016-2017 Streetscape Task Force. This is why it took them a year to produce standards. So I appreciate people coming together and joining us for comments tonight. So I'm going to start with what I think is the easier one, the sidewalk. So sidewalk, I think, with banding is a good compromise. It's kind of nod to the past, ties in with concrete, hopefully more accessible. I think to the earlier discussion, I would like to see what the amenity and building zone looks like with that ribbon, just because I think a wider cross-section of the street would be helpful to understand how that transition might look like, especially when it's a wider sidewalk, like a 14-foot wide one. My second question is, we have the accessibility study underway, is that correct? Do they have an expert opinion on crosswalk, sidewalks to share with us?
I don't know, that's the ADA transition plan
Yes.
you're referring to? I don't know offhand if they've analyzed this.
I don't
can
think
check.
the draft report we were looking at had a specific recommendation.
Okay, I guess if they were like assessing our streets and they had experts out there, they could say, hey, this is really not great, you really should move to this. That would help give us more professional voices beyond a bunch of opinions here. Second question, I know that anecdotally, we've always talked about how brick has been expensive to install and maintain, and then now there's proposals on the table for at least for crosswalks, the zebra stripes versus the stamped asphalt. Do we have the cost difference for what it is to install and maintain over time for thermoplastic versus stamped asphalt? So that cost can be additional consideration besides accessibility and safety?
Well, we have some numbers. I'm not sure that we have all the right ones in front of us right now.
Like roughly, is it like, because thermoplastic, I imagine, maybe lasts 3-5 years before we have to lay it down again. I don't know how long stamped asphalt, but I would like to factor that in, right? Because I imagine if you were doing stamped asphalt, you're probably not redoing it ever, or maybe do you?
So a couple thoughts, right? And we can see if we can dig up some additional information. As we've talked to the team about the stamped asphalt version, part of the trick is like if it becomes tricky if you have to patch it. So if you had to dig something up for a water main or something underneath that crosswalk, now like you can't just go. You'll have an asphalt patch in the middle of this, right? And so
And have a dyed asphalt patch then, right?
So it's problematic for maintenance in some regards, right? So I think and I believe our team, this is the part we can do, get some more information. I believe our team's made some investments in equipment and technology for better thermoplastic kind of application in the city. So some of the comments about how it's faded in different parts of the city, I think some of the newer applications that we're putting out there are going to hold up much better.
Got it. Yeah, so maintenance is important to me because I think up to now we've talked about how it's, brick clear has been more expensive to install, not to mention the fact that we can't even use federal dollars, grant dollars anymore for brick installation, so that's important. But I think for those of you who've listened to me through budget seasons, like maintenance is also important. So factoring that cost and not just the initial upfront cost. So if you're telling me thermoplastic hopefully is also cheaper to maintain, that's hopefully a plus as well. I do hear Justine's comment, though, about how to really better define the pedestrian area and also just note that you're in a special place in Falls Church. And so if we do move to kind of that thermoplastic crosswalks everywhere, I would love to see more street art or street trees. You come into Falls Church, you notice that you're entering street trees. When we had the Sacramento COG here, that was one of the things they immediately noticed when coming from the Fairfax County part of Falls Church into Falls Church. The city is the new street trees, the brick sidewalks, they did notice that as well. So if we don't have that as our defining characteristic going forward, it would be nice to think about other ways to let people know they're in a special place. A question for the in-flight project. So there were 2 projects that needed change orders and then 4 that changed designs. Does this delay any of those projects as well? I know it ideally reduces cost, but.
No, it is, so the 2 CIP projects listed are North Washington and Columbia Street intersection, and then the South Maple Annandale roundabout project. Both of those change orders we do not think would delay those projects.
And then for the ones that.
But to be clear, it's because we've already made the administrative decision to have them go with the concrete standard that you've seen.
With a ribbon or no ribbon or?
With the ribbon.
With the ribbon.
That's correct, right? With Maple Avenue roundabout.
Correct.
We have, council discussed that contract approval, said proceed, but with a concrete sidewalk. So we provided them with this guidance and we're processing that change order right now.
Got it.
And the same contractor's doing the other project in North Washington and Columbia, and we've started discussions with them about that.
Okay. For the ones that changed designs, it was like the West Broad Multimodal, Great Streets, South Washington and North Washington. We expect that the project cost will come down then with removing brick sidewalks?
Yes, we don't have exact numbers on that, but yeah, those are all still in the design phase of engineering, so yes.
Okay. Now I know that we might need that money anyway because projects always come in more expensive. But one thing that's been a pet peeve of mine is we have various intersections where we've only done like 2 or 3 legs of a crosswalk. It'd be really great to finish up intersections. Like West, I think, is one. Lee is another one where we only have ped heads on one side and no crosswalks on the other. There's probably several other ones across the city. So I would encourage us, while we're thinking of pedestrian accessibility, to take the money from saving on crosswalks that are brick and actually upgrade the other intersections if possible so we get all 4 legs to be ADA standards. And then I think that was it. Actually, the 3 hot crosswalks, we have 1 brick and 2 thermoplastic. Is there a reason why we did that? Were we just thinking ahead?
Which one?
The 3 hot crosswalks that we have, Berry, Fairfax, and Oak. The one at Oak is brick, but the ones at Berry and Fairfax are thermoplastic. Is there a reason why? That's across Broad Street, so I thought they would be consistent.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that change was made. And I also just note that this one, the stamped one we've been talking about, Oak and Broad, is not across Broad. But I know you're talking about the ones on Broad.
The ones on Broad for the new Hawks?
I don't know offhand why that decision was made.
Okay. Is it because East Broad's outside the commercial streetscape? Yeah. Okay, well, people are using them already, so even though lights aren't on, that was just more of an FYI that staff should be aware that people are crossing the street there. I think we had consensus on sidewalk with banding, so in terms of like readiness for Monday, because I know this is our work session. Sidewalk with banding, I think I heard agreement from council on. On crosswalks, I heard majority support for zebra stripes.
I have one question. The zebra stripes are not reflective, though, right?
They are.
They are reflective. So if someone driving at dusk, the lights would reflect off that. Okay.
Yeah, the high visibility term that we keep using is as opposed to just like paint or something. It is that more reflective material.
Well, then I would support that because I feel like that's a lot safer, especially as, it's especially when school lets out in the summer and these kids are walking around and it's dusk, I think that's going to catch someone's attention more, you know, as it's getting darker.
Okay. Any final thoughts on this?
I did like Ms. Comet's thought that anywhere we expect cars to drive through sidewalks, we should encourage concrete, like the exit from 301 West Broad. There may be others as well. I think some of the newer ones do have concrete in that driveway, but I think that's something we should suggest, request going forward and to the maintenance for the existing.
I think upgrading existing stuff probably requires a deeper discussion, because I imagine it'll depend, like, whether we touch ones around City Hall, what we do with Harris Teeter, whether there's maintenance agreements, but I think in general, there's interest to move to more accessibility. Okay.
No, I was just thinking about the driving ones, the ones where there are actually cars going over them. That's probably a more limited universe that might be easier to review.
Wouldn't that have in the new standard, would have the concrete with the brick ribbon? So you're saying no ribbon at all?
No. I'm just saying, as we think about, and I'm going to use Harris Teeter again, that exit from that parking garage is 100% brick. And all that brick is in really bad shape at this point after 10 years of people driving over it, or 8 years. So when that is redone, we should somehow request that that become concrete. It could have ribbons or not ribbons, but there should be a drive apron different standard than that is accessible to walkers and wheelers, and also better for cars, more durable for cars.
Okay. Okay. Any final thoughts? Okay. Well, thank you, Council. We might be ready for Monday. Thank you, boards and commissions, for joining us as well, and all your input.